Hi, I'm Beth Graves, and thank you for joining us on the Circus Arts Spotlight. Each week, we'll shine the spotlight on the people, programs, and events of the Circus Arts Conservatory. In addition to professional and student youth performances, we'll explore incredible outreach programs and learn how the circus arts impact so many aspects of life. For more information on today's topic, or anything circus arts related, please go to our website, circusarts.org. Now, let's get started. Hi, thank you for joining the Circus Arts Spotlight. Today, we are going to be speaking with Michael SALMON, who is the Director of Admissions for the Middle and Upper Schools at the Outdoor Academy here in Sarasota. Michael was a diver in high school and college, which led him to performing in high diving shows across the United States. He loves all things circus, and if he could, he would run away and join the circus himself. Instead, he is on the board of directors at the Circus Arts Conservatory and is a mainstay at the Big Top each February. Hey, Michael, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you, Beth. You can travel with me any day. That was a wonderful welcome, and thank you for putting together that great bio.
No problem. So I'm glad that you could join us today to speak about all things circus. So let's start off by talking about where you grew up.
Yeah, so I am a product of the North Country, which is above upstate New York, from a small town called Lowville, New York, spelled Lowville, where we have more cows than we have people. So sometimes we joke around and call it Cowville. But I spent my entire formative years there, and at the age of 26, I finally left the North Country and moved to Sarasota. So I am a true North Country person at heart. I don't miss the winters. I do miss the 2 months of summer that we get up there, but that's where I spent the majority of my life.
So when you were a child, were you attracted to the circus arts?
I was. Growing up, I was a terrible child. My poor parents had to endure many years of me tormenting babysitters and climbing up on the entertainment center and jumping off and doing backflips. And, it was at an early age that my parents put me in a gymnastic program where there were mats and safe spaces for me to climb, jump, flip, twist, you name it. And it wasn't until I actually had the opportunity in my kindergarten year to attend the Billy Martin Circus that came to town every winter and performed in our gymnasium. And it was there that I was just captivated. And I knew at that point in time, at some point in my life, I wanted to get up on a trapeze bar, or I wanted to walk on a slack wire, or I just wanted to be in the ring in a costume and make people laugh, smile, gasp. And so I would say that, early in life, I was enamored with the circus arts and intrigued with the circus arts. I didn't really know what the circus was other than what I got to experience with the Billy Martin Circus in our gymnasium.
So you are not from a circus family. There's nobody in your family history that goes back to circus.
Absolutely not. I think if you were to poll my family, they would all say they are not athletically inclined whatsoever. Many of my family members would probably say they have 2 left feet, like myself at times. But no, nobody in my family ever was involved in the arts, really. I think we all had an appreciation for the circus arts. The Billy Martin Circus was a staple for our family every year. We kids look forward to going into our midwinter break, knowing that we got to see Billy Martin's production be put on in the gymnasium. We look forward to going to the Enchanted Forest Water Safari just, a few miles away from our home in the Adirondack Park, because they also had a little family circus right in their park. And so every year, whether it was Dondi the elephant or even, the Españas or the Gayonas flying on the trapeze, they would always bring someone to town. But nobody in my family can claim that they have ever been in a circus that I know of. And I think many of my family members would say, though, they have had an affinity for the circus and the circus arts, forever.
So you didn't see the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, as a child?
Sadly, I did not. But luckily, my grandmother, if we were to actually think about my family and the potential for anyone to be in a show, it would have been my grandmother, and she just never tell any of us, because there are a lot of things we're learning about her now in her 85 years that leave me scratching my head about. But she and my grandfather, for my 16th birthday, actually took me to a Ringling Brothers show when I came down to visit them here in Florida. They were wintering in Florida with my uncle, and we went to the Bayfront Coliseum in St. Petersburg, where I actually had the chance to see Bellow Knock perform in Bow and Bellow, a Ringling Brothers show that was spectacular. And I remember it like it was yesterday because my grandmother bought us ringside seats. We were right next to Bellow's sway pole, and we were right underneath essentially his motorcycle that went on the wire and had somebody underneath it. And it was, again, that level of production that everyone always used to joke around and say, Michael, you're going to run around and join the circus at some point in your life. And I never thought it would be true, and here we are today, and I guess it is true as part of the Circus Arts Conservatory.
Yeah. So I know that you were a diver when you were in high school and college, and that led you to sort of become a diving performer. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so in my sophomore year in college, so freshman to sophomore year, I decided to do a high diving show, perform in a high diving show for summer vacation. So many of my classmates were heading off for their internships, many going to New York City, working on Wall Street, putting our economics degrees to good use, or economic studies at that point to good use. And I had a good friend, Emily, who said, why don't we go out to Sandusky, Ohio, and perform in a high diving show? And I said, that sounds great. There's only one thing, one issue. I'm not a high diver. I'm scared of heights. I can just do springboard. She's like, that's great. And the rest is history. When I got out to Sandusky, I just caught the bug. And that was really my first experience with performing, and perhaps the best 3 years of my life, those summer vacations when I was at Cedar Point, the roller coaster capital of the world, performing 4 to 6 shows per day for crowds anywhere from 12 to 1,800 people in the stands, people wanting your autographs, people wanting to get photos, but at the end of the day, performing the same show 4 times a day, but no 2 shows were ever the same. And it was just, I mean, I get goosebumps. I have goosebumps right now. Sadly, we're on a podcast and you can't see it, but just thinking about those experiences and what we got to do and the crazy things we did. Some things I'm not too proud of, but I loved learning how to high dive. I would have never imagined myself climbing 80 feet in the air on a radio tower to a small perch about a foot, basically about a foot long by a foot wide, and stand backwards and jump and hit the water and wait to hit the bottom and come back up and salute the crowd. And doing fire dives. I mean, when I called my parents once to tell them that they had lit me on fire and I performed my first fire dive, my dad said, okay, enough of this. You need to come home right now. But I mean, it was just incredible. And it was so neat to experience the performing arts in that way, to be at a park that was so rich with live entertainment. There was an ice skating show. There were 3 other stage shows. The people that I worked with, for instance, Orlando Duque, who is a former Red Bull cliff diver. He just retired this past year, but the king of cliff diving. There's an IMAX movie out there about his diving career and his diving life. I mean, he's done some really cool things like jump off a helicopter into the ocean in Antarctica. I mean, just some really neat things. But he was the guy who taught me how to high dive. He was the guy that was basically helping Cirque feed high divers into the roles for their show out in Vegas. And so he was the guy that opened my eyes to that this doesn't have to be a summer job if you don't want it to be a summer job. You could make this a career. And other people, Brandon, Mike, who are still performing with Cirque, who have performed with Dragon, who have been in China, who have traveled the world, who have been on cruise ships performing. So I still do think back on my days as a performer, and I now live vicariously through my friends who are still performing, and give them props for being able to continue. Because if I were to try and dive on a board right now, I'd either break it or I'd break my back trying to touch my toes. So I applaud them for that.
So did you stop the performing when you graduated college, or did you continue doing it after that?
Yeah, so it's a really an interesting story. So going into my summer after graduation, I had more or less told my parents, I'm just going to do one last summer of high diving while I can, because I really didn't think at that point I was necessarily good enough to be in Cirque. or that I could make a career out of it, which I should have never doubted myself. That's a regret that I have and a life lesson I've learned. But, it was the understanding that when I was done with my show in Sandusky, and then I was actually contracted to go out to the Colorado State Fair and perform in our high diving show there for 2 weeks, and then I was going to put my education to good use and go to New York City and work in finance around Wall Street. And I did that. And it was kind of my swan song, if you will, for the end of my diving career. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And when I was talking with my parents about the potential of making this a career, I think they were a little scared. They didn't really have an understanding of what Cirque at that time was, what O was about, these shows. And so when I took my mom to see La Nuba for the first time at Downtown Disney, she was just moved. And I think she felt some regret as well, like, oh, this could have been you. Maybe I should have pushed you more to do that. And I just said, I love that I'm still able to be here. I love that I'm still able to live vicariously through my friends who are performing. But for all intents and purposes, that last high dive, that last diving show I did in Colorado, Pueblo, Colorado in 2006, that was it for me.
Yeah. I think it's kind of sad.
But maybe I it's sad, but I will tell you, in that show, that was one of the best experiences of my life, but one of the scariest experiences, because that's where I learned the fire dive, because we all ended up in Pueblo, which it's beautiful in Pueblo. But when we were there in September, it was hot during the day and 30 degrees at night. But none of us knew that we had a fire dive in the contract. And so we more or less drew straws, and I lost. And if you can imagine, when doing the fire dive from 30 feet in the air, my costume involved 2 pairs of sweatpants, 2 hooded sweatshirts, a pair of gloves, and a towel that was with a rope that connected it, laced in kerosene. And you went up on the perch, you closed the hooded sweatshirt, you put your hands inside the hooded sweatshirt, and you waited for the heat to come in, and then you jumped. And that was that was how I learned the fire dive. So maybe I went out with a bang and with flair, and that's okay.
Oh my gosh, I was going to ask how your diving related to the circus, but I think you just told us that.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it was not as organized as the circus that I get to see every year with Dolly and Pedro here in Sarasota. But what was so interesting was some of the performers that I worked with had performed at the highest level within this industry, with Cirque, as high divers, as Russian swingers, as Russian swing artists, and so those two worlds did mesh and bleed together. But it was really also at a time when O and some of the aquatic shows were new and not really as popular as they are now.
Yeah. Huh. Well, really, really interesting little story that you just told. So
perhaps not my proudest moment, but I did learn the fire dive, and I loved every minute of it.
I just hope somebody somewhere has it on video.
We'll have to see. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, we'll have to do a search when this is all over. When we're done speaking, we'll do some searches. So, your love for circus, is that something you just think you were born with? I mean, where do you think that comes from?
A little bit of both. I think I was born with it. Kind of going back to my grandmother, my only living grandparent. I love her dearly. My grandmother, I think if she could, would be a dancer. I think she'd be on Broadway. I think she would do anything to be in a spotlight, just because she loves to make people happy, and she just has that gene. And I have a cousin who was a musical theater performer, Starlight Express national tour, has done some really incredible things, has been on television. But I think my love for circus arts was just always in me. I think my love for anything acrobatic was always in me. And I was just so lucky and privileged to have such great parents who never really stopped me from pursuing that. I mean, growing up in a small town with limited resources, I mean, we had a gymnastic gym, but it was a gymnastic gym for female artists, female gymnasts. There was no male athletic equipment. There were no rings. There were no parallel bars. There was no high bar at that point. So I literally would go to gymnastics and tumble get on the trampoline, do a little bit of vault. But my parents were always committed. If that was what was going to make me happy and that was my outlet and that was what I was passionate about, they just kept feeding me that opportunity. And then eventually gymnastics turned into diving. And again, I was just so fortunate that my parents sacrificed a lot. I would travel an hour and a half each way